Well, if the target on SMU's back wasn't big enough, it sure as hell is now. And that's thanks to the coach.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On SMU, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day as we get this podcast out, especially in audio form, at the top of the day so you have it on your morning commute. We do so every day, Monday through Friday, at 8 a.m. We also go live on YouTube, or premiere on YouTube, rather, at 1 p.m. Central Time. My name is Grayson Singleton, and so glad that you're joining me today, spending a little bit of your time with me. Hey, coming up on today's show, Coach Lashlee spoke about the running back room at ACC Media Day, and I find it interesting because we finally get some clarification on what that room could look like post-Brashard Smith. We're also going to talk about comments made from Isaiah Nwokobia, and that should make you feel a lot better about this SMU defense in 2025, coming off of a brilliant year in 2024. So let's get into the content. But first, we got to start with the target on the SMU Mustangs back is now even bigger after Rhett Lashlee said what he had to say about the SEC at ACC Media Day. Now, Lashlee, interestingly enough, wasn't the only coach to take aim at the SEC at media days, because in the Big Ten over in Las Vegas, Indiana coach Curt Cignetti really criticized, and hilariously, by the way, the SEC scheduling when talking about how they canceled the Virginia home and home, and then basically they're playing 3 FCS teams in their non-con. He just said, I'm playing an SEC schedule, which he's not wrong. Let's just go ahead and say that. He's not really wrong. I don't know if he should be the one sending that message, but he's not wrong. The SEC scheduling sucks. It really does. This coming from somebody who lives in SEC country in Norman, Oklahoma. But let's talk about Rhett Lashlee for a second. Because while Lashlee didn't take aim at the SEC scheduling, he took aim at the SEC's depth for some reason. Here's what he had to say, which was, I still don't really know why he had to say this. But basically, he fired off on the SEC. He said Commissioner Greg Sankey, who is the commissioner of the SEC, has called his league college football's toughest and most competitive throughout the offseason, to which Lashlee responded, quote, the SEC has had the same 6 schools win the championship since 1964. Not a single one has been different since 1964. That's top-heavy to me. That's not depth. Now, before we break this down, we need some context here because I restrained myself from making a judgment until I figured out, okay, what made him say this? And in the interest of pumping up the conference of the ACC, which, by the way, it is indisputable that Rhett Lashlee has been a fervent advocate of the strength of the ACC, which is what you want from a member coach, particularly in a member coach from a DFW Metroplex. So we get where he's coming from here. By the way, Rhett Lashlee might be a hell of a politician too, but I digress. With that as the background, he's trying to, and really tried to pay homage to Miami last year, saying the 10-2 Hurricanes should have been in the college football playoff. He also campaigned on the same track after SMU lost the ACC championship game to Clemson. So there is precedent here of him pumping up the ACC. Here's why it's not the greatest idea to have said what he said. Now, look, far be it from me to accuse somebody who jumps onto a big stage and just decides to go after it. It's something I've done in my career. I wasn't shy when I got my first radio job. I wasn't shy when I got my second and current radio job. I'm not shy on this podcast in terms of saying what I think is right and what I believe. But I also do believe that Rhett Lashlee, with those comments, has put himself in the crossfire of 2 things. One, he probably couldn't give less of a care about, and the other he probably does. The first is the one he couldn't give 2 damns about, and that is all of college football, in terms of the fan bases, are going to hate you now, especially in the South. I've lived in the South all my life. I've lived in SEC country pretty much all my life, except the 4 years I lived in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Let's just say college football fans in the South reason more on emotion than actual logic. So with that knowledge, you didn't make any friends with that one. And God forbid you have to go up against a team in the SEC, in the college football playoff, and you lose, you're going to be the butt of a ton of vitriol. They will take aim at you. The second people he put in the crossfire is his team, because SMU's got to perform now. Everything's pulled back. The coach has spoken. He has said that the depth in the ACC is better than the depth in the SEC. You can't fall to 7 wins right after your coach says that. That cannot happen, barring a catastrophic injury that we can tie to something like that. But the dudes, you got to go out and perform. And I think as a head coach, you always want to inspire your team. You want to build confidence into your team. But what you don't want to do is make your team a target. And we talked about this earlier in the week, that SMU is going to be a target simply because they were the new kids on the block in 2024 that happened to crash the party, so much so that they were a 56-yard field goal away from taking the ACC championship game into overtime. So there was going to be a new heightened target on your back just because of what you did in your first year in the conference. Now there's a national target on your back, because anybody who gets to line up between the lines against SMU is going to give it to the Mustangs. And they're going to have to be ready. That is what he did. Now, is that some egregious transgression? No, it's not. But people are going to give you your best now. And that means the players have to perform. And that means you, Rhett Lashlee, have to perform as well. Again, far be it from me to say somebody should go into a new environment and be timid and, hold their mouth. Far be it from me to do it, because I've done the complete opposite. My first week doing radio in Norman, I was asked who was going to be better in 2024, Texas or Oklahoma. And I said Texas because I believe that. Caught a lot of you-know-what for it, but guess who was right? This guy. So far be it from me to quell anybody's bravado and anybody's belief in expressing what they think. But you have set a target on your back, and maybe SMU rises to the occasion, and that's the best thing for them. But here's also the thing, if you want to just isolate that to the statement. The SEC is top heavy. Okay, what is the ACC this year? Because it is consensus. There is not a consensus in the SEC who the top 3 teams will be. There's LSU, there's Texas, there's Georgia, there's Alabama. There's any combination of those 4. And then there's the outliers, which some people think A&M is going to be good. Then there's Oklahoma, yada, yada, yada. Right. In the ACC, it is pretty consensus around the college football media that the 3 teams competing for the ACC championship game and representation for the conference in the CFP are Clemson, Miami, and SMU. And then there's a drop-off. And then we can start the list from there. But so who's the more top-heavy conference? I'll give you a hint. It's not the SEC. Now, there have been times that the SEC has been highly top-heavy. That part is not. That part is indisputable. The SEC has been top-heavy before. But again, the message matters, but so does the messenger. The SEC is really deep right now. The ACC, not so much. So there's a lot of things going on here. Rhett Lashlee is being a hell of a campaigner for his conference, which ultimately is a business move because he's trying to get as much conference representation in this year's CFP and in an expanded CFP. I hate that I took so long to get to that point, but there is a lot of politicking going on here. Is that he's trying to get the most representation for the conference in the college football playoff, whether that remains at 12 or goes to 14 or 16. But there is a better way that could have been crafted. And no matter what the intent of saying it was, he definitely heightened the target on his team's back. Now it's up to him to go perform as a coach and his dudes to go perform on the field. Coming up next here on Locked On SMU on a Thursday, let's talk about one of those positions that needs to perform in 2025 because they're replacing a really, really big departed superstar. We'll talk about that next. Locked On SMU. Keep it here. This episode today is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or some high-stakes soccer action that has been compelling over the summer, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it just a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting burned at the beach. I've used FanDuel for a while to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, welcome back to Locked On SMU, part of the Locked On Podcast family. Thank you for spending some time with me. I'm Grayson Singleton. Go ahead and give me a follow on Twitter. There it is right there at the bottom of the screen, Gray_Singleton2. Would love to interact with all of you. Would also love to interact with you in the YouTube comments as well. So let us know what you think. Am I an idiot? Is Rhett Lashlee an idiot? Do you agree with me? Let me know. Let me know. Hit us up in the comments. I always go back at night and look through them. Okay. By the way, subscribe to this channel. And also, you can find the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast as well. Okay, the running back room, because this is one of the more compelling things, and one of the things I was looking for from Rhett Lashlee in ACC Media Day is what is the state of that room following the departure and eventual NFL drafting of Brashard Smith. So here's what Lashlee had to say, quote, competition, healthy competition is a big part of what we do in our program, and that will play out over the next 4 to 6 weeks. We feel like we have 4 really talented players at running back. Derek McFall returns for his true sophomore year, similar style player to what Brashard is. He can catch the ball, run between the tackles. He's explosive. A year of experience. I think he's poised to have a good season for us. Okay, that is interesting, that what he said about Derek McFall, because based on that, and based on he's the first one that was singled out, I think that not Brashard Smith, Derek McFall has the inside track to the starting job. And it would make sense. He's been in the system. He was there last year. So it's going to make a lot of sense that he would be the guy that is on the inside track to start. Also, here's what he said about the transfers. As I lost the quote, my computer just completely did something it wasn't supposed to do. You mentioned Chris Johnson, similar style player, fast, explosive, can catch the ball, good in space. So those guys give you that versatility. TJ Harden's coming over from UCLA, where he led the school in rushing. He's a big back, physical. He can run and has good speed. And we've got a freshman in Reed, who was a recruited All-American, one of the highest recruited players to ever come to SMU. He's big, he's physical, he's explosive. So I think we've got 4 guys. I don't know if it will be a tandem. One guy will raise the bar, but I feel like we have 4 really good options. That all have different strengths that will play within our offense. Okay, that's what you like to hear from a running back room, I think. I think this running back room is going to be not just compelling, I think it will be productive. And I think Derek McFall has the inside track to the starting job. I think the complement to Derek McFall will be Chris Johnson. Similar play style, hasn't been in the system for as long. Good career at Miami, not great, nothing to knock your socks off, but a good player. I think those two working in tandem can be really fun. TJ Harden is going to be the guy that I think is going to get you those short yardage and those necessary situational yards. That's what I see from a guy like TJ Harden coming over from UCLA. So with those three, and then you've got the freshman Reed, we'll see how much they utilize him in his true freshman season if he indeed doesn't redshirt. But those three cover all your bases. And you don't have to run one into the ground per se, unless one just separates himself as far and ahead as RB1. Will that happen? I don't know. It could. The likely candidate for that would be Derek McFall. But when you can go from a Brashard Smith to a guy that was behind Brashard Smith and plays similar to Brashard Smith, I think you give that guy every chance to lose the job. And that's what I decipher from what Rhett Lashlee had to say on the running back room. But regardless of however the depth chart shakes out when SMU takes the field against East Texas A&M, I got that right this time, they will have covered all the bases. And they will have positional versatility. They will have creative options for how to deploy these guys. So I think even though Brashard Smith left and there's no true bell cow yet, there's no clear separation on the depth chart in terms of who's the leader. They have enough between the three, McFall, Harden, Johnson, to cover all the bases and still be highly productive in that running back room. But again, coaches will sometimes drop hints. They will either drop hints or they will give you an insight into what they think is going to play out. And I think the fact that Derek McFall was the first name out of his mouth and the fact that he said he's very similar in play style to Brashard Smith means something. I don't think that's something to just scoff at. I don't think that's something to summarily dismiss and ignore. I think if you're a betting person right now, and we'll see who's right when the depth chart comes out prior to kickoff, but I do believe right now that job is Derek McFall's to lose. I don't think Chris or TJ has shown anything, or shown enough, rather, let me put it that way, to displace the incumbent, or not the incumbent, rather, but the natural successor. So that's what I take from Rhett Lashlee's comments on the running back room. There's somebody else with more comments. Isaiah Nwokobia spoke at ACC Media Day, and you're going to get fired up for this defense when you hear what he had to say coming up next. One final segment as we close up shop here on a Thursday edition of Locked On SMU. Thank you for making us part of your day. Thanks for sticking with us. Remember to subscribe to this page as well. Okay, so Isaiah Nwokobia also had some very interesting things to say about the SMU defense. And by the way, I thought Isaiah Nwokobia was phenomenal in his answers. But the question for the SMU defense has been for the longest time, how do you duplicate or at worst approximate what you did in 2024? And I keep coming back to this number. The fact that SMU held opponents 44 yards under their season average of offensive production. I think that's outstanding, and I think that's a hard thing to duplicate. So how do they duplicate that? They're returning 6 starters. They're also elevating dudes who were in the rotation last year. The whole raw number of how many starters you're returning always has to be put in context. And I think SMU is a prime example of that, because the context is, yes, you lost some really good players, but you return maybe the best safety tandem in the country. We'll see. Could definitely be the best safety tandem in the ACC. But you return that, you return 2 good edge rushers, and you're elevating a linebacker who was learning behind a couple of really good ones last year. So the entire formula looks pretty good for SMU. But here's what Isaiah Nwokobia said when asked on if the defense could get better in 2025. He says, quote, "What makes us really different is our brotherhood. With college football today, obviously every year is almost a new team with all the new transfers. But I think Coach Lashlee does a great job of focusing us, having that brotherhood, making sure we gel, both on and off the field. We're doing stuff, paintball, things like that, just to make sure we stay together and build that chemistry because we know what's going to take us far more than anything else. That is brotherhood." It's an interesting note there. And I think it's an astute point that he says the second sentence. Almost every year is an almost new team with all the transfers. And there are going to be new pieces every single year. And this is why I think teams with excellent leadership, especially units with exceptionally good leadership, are going to continue to rise in this new era. Because if you've got good leadership that can help guys assimilate into their new spots and assimilate into the program and get the most out of them and their personalities and just see where it fits into the program, those teams can still be really, really successful. But you have to have that leadership, which is why I am so bullish on SMU's defense being either as good as it was or being close to it in 2024, is because they still have that leadership. Nwokobia also said a couple of things as well to that point outside of the brotherhood. By the way, he was asked about his paintball, and he said, "Don't ask me about that." I wonder if that means he's not very good at paintball. On how SMU's defense has pushed itself to get better, Nwokobia says, quote, "We show up every day to put in the work, ready to go 110%. We compete in everything we do, whether it be conditioning or speed work or the weight room. We make sure we compete. Healthy competition, I think, is extremely important." And it is. It really is. But you combine the healthy competition with the rapport they're building on and off the field, with the leadership that is coming back. It's a long-winded way to say that there is really enormous promise with this SMU team. There really is. Especially with this defense. Because when you have a guy back like that who is setting the tone from a leadership perspective, that sort of thing is going to permeate to everybody. When there's a leader like that, ingratiating new pieces, like a guy who could very well be the signal caller for the defense in Zakai Barker coming over from East Carolina, that can be a really pivotal adjustment period and assimilation period for that guy. But you have to have that guy in place. And I think the fact that Alex Kilgore, and we're going to talk about things that he said on Friday's edition, I think the fact that Alex Kilgore went to ACC Media Day and Coach Lashlee said, "You're one of the guys that I want here," along with KJ, with Logan, and with Isaiah, that speaks volumes. So I think in a year where there is turnover, where there's elevation, and your success is going to hinge upon how much you can keep teams out of the end zone, because you don't want to get in a shootout every single week with teams in the ACC, especially when you go up against Clemson in Clemson and go up against a Carson Beck-led Miami team who, again, you can roll your eyes at Carson Beck. I still think he's got good college football left to play. You're going up against 2 9-win teams from a year ago in Baylor and TCU. You don't want to get in a track meet every single week. So if your defense can get stops and you combine that with the way we think, talked about this yesterday, the way we think SMU's offense can get better, if you combine that with a defense that is just as good, maybe takes a half step back, but they've got leadership, they've got continuity, they've got fluidity, and they've gelled with the new pieces, that's how you put all the ingredients together. And to tie this back to the top of the show, that's how you stave off that target. And when teams come with their best, you're ready to give your best right back, and you validate that sort of confidence and that sort of brashness that your head coach exuded at ACC kickoff. That's how you do it. And the ingredients and the formula is there for SMU to do just that in 2025. Good stuff. Day 2 reacting to ACC Media Day. Coach Lashlee, you have a fan in me, sir, because you have in a time of the year where content, we can be scraping the bowl for content. There is a lot of nuance and a lot of ways that we can break down Coach Lashlee. And I appreciate that to the nth degree. Isaiah Nwokobia, Kevin Jennings, those dudes provided excellent quotes and said exactly what you as an SMU fan would want to hear. And we're going to continue to break it down in the coming days. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go ahead and check out the portal with Brian Smith. He's got all the latest on all of the happenings around the world of college football. So be the most informed fan and go check him out on Locked On's The Portal. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is Grayson Singleton. Take it easy, everybody. Thank you for watching Locked On SMU.